I was planning to talk about the um, Joshua Dubois fight from Wembley, which has made a British post-war record for the largest crowd at a boxing match in this country in modern times. 96,000 people. A massive crowd, massive. I remember my fight 10 years ago. I had a charity boxing match at the Stadium of Light in Sunderland, at a venue room there, and there were around 600 people in attendance. And that was, for the first time, for someone who hasn't been in the ring before, that was an experience. So, 96,000 people. To put that in context, that is like a sizable town. That's like a population of a sizable town, say Hartlepool. Astonishing. And it seems like it's only getting bigger. So I was going to talk about this issue, but I want to talk also about another aspect of the boxing world at the moment, which is the influence of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And I'm going to read a piece from the Times, so bear with me. And go do that in a minute, but just have a little rundown of other large crowd fights in this country. And it's interesting, because boxing has often been US centric. But actually, most American venues are considerably smaller. Madison Square Garden and Caesar's Palace are much, much smaller venues than some of the British venues, and indeed some of the European venues. Germany has also hosted some large scale boxing crowds. But just in this country in recent years, we had 90,000 that were in attendance for Joshua versus Klitschko, over 70,000 at the Principality Stadium, also in 2017 in Cardiff, for Joshua versus Carlos Takam. In 2022, there was the Tyson Fury Dylan White fight, 94,000, which was a LEM record at Wembley. And the same year at Tottenham, 60,000 in attendance for Tyson Fury versus Derek Chisora. Um, Joshua is, having his name associated with a lot of these big fights. I remember the Carl Froch George Groves fight 10 years ago. At the time, the 80,000 figure was a big deal because that was huge at the time. Still is a big, big number, but it's just getting bigger and bigger. In fact, for the Joshua versus Klitschko fight, they actually had to expand the license on Wembley Stadium. But this is, the last time these sort of numbers were seen in boxing matches, you have to go back to the 30s, like Lewis versus Schmeling, or even further back, Dempsey versus Firpo, 1923. Um, I think it puts into doubt this myth that boxing is dead, that there's no interest there. Clearly there is, and clearly this has been a very good period for British heavyweight boxing. In the 20th century, we were very lackluster. We were always trailing behind as contenders, the Americans. But in the 21st century, heavyweight boxing, it's fair to say, has been dominated by Britons and Ukrainians. Anyway, that's just observe. I think in coming years, it's very plausible that we'll see the 100,000 mark broken. Probably in a Dubois fight, he's going to be the next big name in British heavyweight boxing. In case you don't know, he scored a big upset, defeating Joshua. I think it was in round five. I watched the fight. It was an impressive performance for the underdog. But that sort of environment, it's almost so big that it's almost like the intensity is distant because there's just so many people that you almost don't get the intensity. Wembley, of course, is a very modern venue. It's very well laid out. So it's not like the 30s where people were all kind of crushed together and it's well planned. Anyway, another thing we've seen in heavyweight boxing in recent years, and also in the other divisions, but particularly heavyweight boxing, is the influence of Saudi Arabia, and particularly the promoter Turkey Alakshik, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Um, I personally do have questions about this because when a regime that's known to be oppressive, i.e., Saudi Arabia, appalling human rights record, suddenly puts a lot of focus on sport and a lot of focus on bringing attention to that, you can't help but wonder. The cynical side of me wonders: is this just a way to cover up criticism? I mean, Saudi has made some minor reforms in recent years. Um, it's marginally better than it was 10 years ago. I mean, only recently they outlawed flogging as a punishment, so that's progress. Women can now drive, so there has been some progress made, but it remains an oppressive totalitarian state in many other areas. Atheists are still treated basically like terrorists. Um, they're trying to open up the tourism sector. And I've no doubt that this whole big focus on sport, I'm wary of it. It reminds me of all the promises when Beijing was getting the Olympic Games. Oh, China will reform of human rights, and that of course never happened. It only got worse. Or indeed the controversy around the FIFA World Cup in Qatar. Now, there's critics who think, who make this argument that oppressive regimes shouldn't be rewarded with big, grand sporting events. And then there is the other argument, which is more exposure could actually force them to reform. I'm not sure that that's the case, actually. It certainly hasn't been the case with China. I'm going to read out a report which is troubling related to this from the Times, and the report's by Martin Ziegler, chief sports reporter. Saudi sports washing critic was barred from Wembley. Journalist said he was barred from a heavyweight boxing match at Wembley Stadium after writing that Saudi Arabia's bankrolling of the event was to launder the Gulf Kingdom's image. The Saudi national anthem was played at the venue before the bout on Saturday between the British boxers Anthony Joshua and Daniel Dubois. When the with the stadium's arch lit green and white, the Saudi national colours. Oliver Brown, a columnist with the Daily Telegraph, who had written a critical article on Friday, said he was refused entry when he arrived, and it was made clear to him that it was because of his column. He said, "In 20 years as a journalist, I have never been barred from any sporting event for any reason, let alone for simply expressing an opinion that the hosts do not like. They've called out this exercise in reputation laundering for exactly what it was." The Football Association, which owns Wembley, said promoters who hired the stadium had control over music, lighting, and media accreditation. It was unaware of any plans to play the Saudi anthem before the British national anthem. Michael Buffer announced that. Caroline McCutter, who runs the sports PR company which worked on the boxing match, declined to comment when asked why Brown was barred. It is understood organisers denied he had been, claiming instead that the press list was oversubscribed. Well, that's a convenient excuse. McAteer also declined to comment about the decision to play the Saudi anthem. Nicholas McGeehan of the human rights group Fair Square said, Saudis are well aware that a little money goes a long way in the UK, and they clearly think that extends to neutering the UK press. It's no, I mean, when I look at Eddie Hearn's attitude to this, he's actually in bed with the Saudis. I mean, he has no misgivings at all about this sort of thing. But the implications are quite serious, where you have a British sports journalist barred from a huge event in British sports, one of the biggest bouts ever between two British heavyweights. And, he's being denied entry to do his job because the organisers are touchy on allegations of, and so on. I think that it's troubling, and I don't believe for a second that it was this excuse about it was oversubscribed. I think that's just a convenient excuse. Is it appropriate to play the Saudi national anthem? I'm not sure. Um, there is an argument to be made that the Saudis fundraising on this, the work of Turkey, Alex Jack. I mean, I have to be honest. I watched the fight in high quality. He'd uploaded it on his own channel. A lot of other boxing outlets, you have to pay and subscribe and so on. So I'd be a hypocrite if I said the Saudi influence was entirely bad. And I'll give him his due. He's clearly good at what he does. He's clearly, um, a good promoter, good businessman. But I do think it's shady that Saudi Arabia is getting so many of these big bouts. I mean, there's a lot of questions about it. There's practical questions. I mean, the heat of Saudi, even at night time, surely can't be the best environment for guys to fight. And I remember um, the Fribble in Manila, Ali and Frazier complained about the extremely uncomfortable heat throughout that fight, and that was 50 years ago. Um, so that's just a practical thing. And then Saudi's attitude to women. I mean, Western women have been allowed at those bouts, but it raises the question: if Saudi men come to watch a fight, what about Saudi women who might be boxing fans or not? There's questions like that. Um, I'm just suspicious about so much pandering to an oppressive state, and I think Eddie Hearn is just, he Of course, he's going to do whatever the Saudis ask. He thinks it's good for business. Um, but it doesn't sit that well with me. And we've seen big name fights. Of course, Joshua um, and Ruiz, Fury and Usyk earlier this year, um, held in Riyadh, or actually held in Jeddah, Rage on the Red Sea. But I don't know. I'm uneasy about it. I just think, and then when you get the Saudi national anthem played, I mean, it's always a tradition where the national anthems of both fighters is played at convention. So if one of the fighters was a Saudi, that would be understandable, but that's not the case. It was an all British fight, so I don't know about it. Um, and here's the thing: we have the venues. Wembley is a huge venue, so I don't know why we need the Saudis to host these things. Um, I think Eddie Hearn's a smart promoter. I don't know why there's this necessity to have Saudi bankrolling on this when we have the venues to do it in the first place. Maybe I'm naive. Maybe there's a business part of this I don't understand, but I think there is too much pandering to Saudi Arabia. Look, if it does, if all this exposure and an opening tourist sector and so on does kind of make the kingdom reform, that's a good thing, but I'm not sure. This was the cover, I should say, of where I was getting my sources from on Fight Crowds of Boxing News last week. Yeah, on purely boxing related news, I think Daniel Dubois will be someone to watch. Apparently, he came with his background is iron discipline, very, very strict father. And unlike some fighters, he doesn't have a party lifestyle. He seems like I don't know him very well. I haven't seen many interviews, but he seems like a quiet guy. Um, I mean, actually, not like that unlike Joshua. Both guys are good sportsmen. They're not trash talkers like Tyson Fury. So that's refreshing. But that's my take. I question why there's such a big focus on Saudi Arabia, and it's like we're going to have a big heavyweight clash that don't have the Saudis involved. I don't know.